Hey there, and welcome back to the podcast. I want you to take a moment and think about one of the biggest projects that you have ever had. I mean, it was massive. What comes to mind? I've heard before that building a house is an extremely big project to manage. Or maybe it's even a project at work. Well, let me tell you, you are the biggest project that you will ever have in this lifetime. And how are you doing managing that? What are you hoping to achieve? What are some areas that you still want to improve on? In today's episode, I'm talking with Tony Weaver. He's a consultant, a leader, a life coach, a writer, a runner, and he has project managed his way through life. This episode is jam-packed. Now, in the podcast, you're going to hear me say that I really don't like the word goals, and I don't know what it is. It just makes me feel like I'm not doing enough. But I also have a lot of lazy tendencies, so it may be a little bit of that as well. So if you're like me and you're not really a big lover of goals, maybe just look at it as things that you want to achieve in this life. How does that sound? Are you ready? All right, let's do it. All right, welcome, Tony Weaver. I am so excited to have you on this podcast. I have been watching you from afar, not in a stalkerish kind of way, but I signed up for your emails. I have looked at your website, operationmelt.com. And I just think you talk about leadership, but I kind of want to talk to you about how did you get to where you're at? When I looked at your story, you want to build a world where no goal ever dies of loneliness. And I just thought wow, what a powerful thing. So let's start with you, who you are, what you do, and we'll just kind of get into it from there. But I have a feeling our listeners are really going to be pumped up after they hear you talk and what you have to offer and how you got to where you're at today.
Well, great. I'm so happy to be on the podcast. I'm now a subscriber. I listen to your episodes. I'm glad you're putting it out there. It's helpful, and I think you have a unique take that you can share. So I appreciate you putting yourself out there and putting yourself out there through all of your forums. And I appreciate you letting me be here. As you said, my name's Tony Weaver, and my revised "What Do You Do" story is I help people accomplish their goals. I do it through a number of ways. By day, I'm a consultant with Top Consulting, doing project management consulting in the IT world. But my side business and my passion project is Operation Melt. And as you said, Operation Melt, my vision is I want to create a world where no goal dies of loneliness. And what I mean by that is it's okay to try and fail. Failure is part of the process. When you have a goal inside you and you don't have the courage to try, that's a path to leading a life where you're not fulfilled. And I almost did it myself. We'll talk about that in a bit, but I want people to try. If you fail, it's great. Or if you decide as you are about to try that, if you decide it's really not right for you, that's fantastic too. But just to let it linger on the shelf isn't great. I've built a life around helping people accomplish goals, often through project management or other brain techniques.
That's amazing. And let me just start coming from the corporate world, I hated goals passionately. It's like the word was oh, this sounds like it's going to be really hard. What is your take or your viewpoint on goal setting before you even try to reach a goal?
Goals can be used well or it can be used poorly. Often in corporate America, and trust me, I spent most of my career and even now to an extent in corporate America, and I was one of the people on the other side of the table saying, well, what are your goals for this year? But what I really meant is, how are you going to accomplish the goals that have been set for me this year? So really, the goal setting in corporate America often goes the wrong direction. I think that goals can absolutely change your life. I mean, goals have changed my life. When you start talking about goals, particularly the SMART goals, which stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based, and there are multiple definitions, but that's the one I use. The R is probably where I start. Is it's got to be relevant to you. If you don't really care about the goal, particularly on an emotional level, it doesn't matter. It's going to feel annoying at that point. Yeah. If you care about the goal and it's something that's relevant to you, that changes things, and then you'll be all in and bought into your own goal.
That makes a lot of sense. And you're right. Goal setting in corporate is totally different than in life. But you mentioned a really important word, project management. Like, tell me more about that. What do you mean project management toward a goal? Because I just think it's project management as this really big thing in corporate America. You know, there's a title, there's a department where they oversee a lot of projects. How do I project manage me, my life, my goals? How does that work?
It starts by taking kind of the broad strokes view of what project means. Start with a big goal, break it down into smaller goals, and start with number one. After you have a plan, you can look for all the ways that plan might fail and plan ahead for all the ways they're going to fail. Then measure progress each day, take partners to make sure that you're accomplishing the right things, and then course correct as you need to. Try to enjoy the journey.
I like this idea about project management. Can you give me an example of how you have used this personally to kind of get like an idea of what you're talking about?
I'll give a really resonating example that kind of the premise of my first book. So in June of 2017, I went to a doctor's appointment, stepped on a scale, and saw that I weighed 325 pounds. It was a big shock to me. It shouldn't have been a shock. I was significantly overweight my whole life. But at that point, just it was the right time for me to say, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to conquer obesity, but I'm not going to consider surgery. I'm not going to consider fad diets. I'm going to do it my way. And my way is project management. I set the goal and then I figured out what are the milestones I need to hit to lose over 100 pounds in under a year. And based on those milestones, I said, okay, well, what do I need to do to achieve those milestones? And I broke it down into a set of behaviors that I would engage in every week, every day, every hour. And I measured progress along the way. So I started with a smart goal of I want to lose over 100 pounds in under a year. I had a why behind that. Then I built a plan of I'm going to use project management. I'm going to achieve these milestones to hit the 1 year point. I measure progress every day, both based on both inputs and outputs. So the output being what's my weight, the inputs of what am I eating, how am I moving, how are other health metrics going. I planned ahead for big obstacles. For example, at the time I was working 60 or 70 hours a week. Well,
Wow.
Me doing that was not going to let me achieve my goal. So, planning ahead for that, I went and I had a very intimidating conversation with my boss and said, here's what I'm doing. Here's why I'm doing it. It means I'm going to cut back on my hours. Here's how I'm going to make it work. And if it doesn't work, we have to have a different conversation. I took partners along the way, both people I told about the journey who helped me as an accountability partner. And I took a team of experts with me. So my doctor, eventually, after I hit the 100-pound mark, I hired a personal trainer. There are various people along the way, and then people who have gone through similar things that every day I was seeking somebody's input. When I started running, like, well, I'm not the only person in the world who runs, not the only person I know who runs. So let me get input from those who do it. And then I tried along the way to make sure that I wasn't doing things that were unsustainable. So part of that is like, I didn't give anything up. I knew if I gave it up, it would make it feel like I'm depriving myself. It wouldn't be fun. So I tried to enjoy the journey along the way. And part of enjoying the journey was celebrating achievement.
I think that's amazing how you've been able to apply your skills to your own life and lose weight. So how much weight have you lost total since you started in 2017?
So the kind of the way the journey went is I hit the 100 pounds in 9 months. I ran my first half marathon at 16 months. So 325 pounds or half a marathon in 16 months. When I officially stopped the weight loss at the end of 18 months, I was down 131. Maintaining a 100-pound weight loss over 5 years, it has less than a 10% success rate.
Wow.
Anybody out there is a fan of the Enneagram. I'm an Enneagram type 3, which is the achiever, which as an achiever, you look at your achievements as validation of your self-worth. And the numbers become a proxy for what those achievements are. And so, I have to remind myself, because a number on a scale change, that doesn't change what I've done.
Exactly. It doesn't change your story. Now, you had mentioned that you have been overweight since most of your life. Like, was there something that contributed to the weight? I'm just kind of curious to hear more about your story and like how you got to where you're at today.
I'll tell you, I was overweight my entire life until I made this decision. From a kid, my journey started pretty rocky. I grew up in a family who was living in survival mode, and survival mode both financially and I would say emotionally as well. So as we were growing up, I was very aware of utility shutoffs, bankruptcies, turning to public assistance for food every now and then. And really, what I came to really appreciate later in life is my grandmother, who lived right next door to us, was essentially keeping the family afloat. And we turned to her on multiple occasions, including I think we would have ultimately ended up homeless if she hadn't helped save the house multiple times. So as an example of how I became aware of this, one of my jobs as a kid is when the power went off on a Saturday night in the middle of dinner, is to take the heavy duty extension cord across the front yard to my grandmother's house, plug it in so we could have power.
Wow.
There's an odd metaphor there. We were powerless except for the power that my grandmother provided us.
Hmm.
So that was an interesting metaphor that dawned on me later in life. But as you can expect, when I said emotionally, when you're living in a financial survival, it takes a big emotional impact because it creates tension. As a kid, I was very aware of my parents constantly arguing and fighting with each other. There was just a lot of ambient negativity. Nobody really celebrated anything because at that point there wasn't much to celebrate. When it came to me, I was growing up the poor, fat, weird kid. Didn't have a lot of friends, so I continually looked for places where I could fit in and meet people, which caused me to do things like, skipping school or skipping class and hanging out, like living in the band room when I was in middle school.
Wow.
And was kind of starting down the same path of survival mode as my parents because I wasn't applying myself. I wasn't really trying really hard.
Did you realize
And,
that at
and
that time, like that you were in survival mode, or was it just a reflection later you had in life? Like,
it was a reflection later in life.
okay.
That's the other challenge. Well, both, being that young, you don't really process that as much. But when you're in survival mode, your brain and judgment don't work the same way as they work outside survival mode. But, I found myself starting down the same path. And around age 15, two monumental things happened in my life at exactly the same time that turned out to be this inflection point, how I existed. The first, my grandmother, who I mentioned was keeping the family afloat, she died suddenly. She had the health problems, but nothing that we thought was imminent. And then one day I was home alone next door and I saw the emergency squad pull up and I went running over to see what was up because I thought my grandfather had a fall or something. Walk up to see the paramedics working on my grandmother. It's like, oh, well, that's not what I expected to see at all. So it kind of caused the money situation. After she died, it caused the money situation in the family to go from bad to worse. And it opened my eyes to a sad truth. And this is one where it's weird to say, but the poverty that my family was facing and all the pain wasn't because it wasn't one of the normal causes. There wasn't some accident. There wasn't some sudden job loss. Or it was really all about choices. And I mean, I'm not going to dig deep into it, but really, my parents, through their actions and in some cases their inactions, they were making choices that kept us in the situation. And choosing things like not working and to go to school instead of working, which it's great to go to school, but if you're the family's in survival mode and you're taking income out and not bringing income in.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're
Working,
saying is like sometimes bad things happen and we know that, but this wasn't the case. This came down to bad choices that were made in their lives that gave this result.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was eye-opening to me to say, wow, bad choices are creating this pain. It's really easy for me to go back and say, oh, it was all bad. It was all bad. Well, there's some good times along the path as a kid. And this is my origin story. It's helped make me who I am today. And I'm happy with who I am today. So, if it was different, who knows where I would have ended up. But at the same time as living this experience in my life, I went to high school and I joined Air Force Junior ROTC. So it's a high school version of the college program sponsored by the military. And it became a really positive experience. It shaped the rest of my life. One of my instructors, Chief Hamlet, I think he recognized the path I was on and he helped me learn different things, helped me learn about the value of hard work and how to recognize and apply talents and how to motivate myself through goals at that point. At that point, most of the goals were in ROTC. Every person has a rank from airman to colonel. Everybody gets rewards and recognition. So at that point, I motivated myself based on, I want the new rank. I want more rewards and recognition. But then it spilled over into my freshman year of school. I was in just regular classes, sophomore, junior, senior. I was in honors classes, AP classes.
Wow.
I was hanging out with a different group of people. I was getting adequate grades. But learning that goals could set me on a different path helped me build some skills that just applied for the rest of my life. Clearly, we started with a conversation. Goals changed my life. But by realizing the power of choices, both good and bad, and the power of goals, I learned that my path could be whatever I want my path to be. I didn't have to become like my family. I choose something completely different. Starting at that moment, survival mode in my life was over. I was now on a different path. But just because I escaped where I came from didn't mean I don't still carry some of it with me and it doesn't still have some impacts here and there.
Oh, totally. I think that's a really great point to make. You're not just like this miracle, like everything's better. It's like we still have our story. And I remember reading in a book that our biography becomes our biology. So like those things are still a part of our lives. But I love a couple of things about your story that you just mentioned. One, you had a choice. You could have easily just said, well, this is how I was raised. This is why I am the way I am. And yeah, those are going to play a part in your life, but you had a choice to make a difference and to be different. And I think the other thing is what you learned through that, like reflecting back on how you were raised, learning from the mistakes of your parents, and again, choosing to learn from it.
Mhm.
No one has this perfect childhood. No one I've ever met, at least. We carry trauma with us, and that is a part of our lives. But man, we have so much power. And that's the thing, is sometimes I think people choose to feel powerless. Look at how my mom treated me. Look at how my dad did that. But it's like, yes, that happened, but we have a choice to learn and grow from each situation that we find ourselves in. And that's what I really appreciated hearing your story, but also how your goals played a part in your life, because I don't think you also wouldn't be where you're at if it weren't that deliberate choice to say, hey, this is what I want to do, this is where I want to go. And then also having someone to believe in you. Like that's like a
Yeah.
bonus in life to find someone like that. That's amazing.
Every situation in life is nuanced. Nothing is absolutely bad or absolutely good. Adversity and trauma, that if you look for them and want to see them, and you get to that point where your brain lets you see them, there are positives in there that build where you are. Just like on the positive side, my story about goals, goals for me were overwhelmingly positive. My goals have also come with a dark side that isn't as positive. Trying to achieve goals, trying to get the next, it made me competitive, but kind of competitive in a different way. For me, that means competitive meant if there's a next step on the ladder, I needed to achieve it. In my mind, every day I wasn't achieving next, I wasn't being successful. I was at risk of slipping back. I was at risk of landing there at the bottom of where I came from. And it's something I still struggle with today.
What continues to motivate you? Because it's easy to slip back. It's easy to just
Mhm.
succumb to our thoughts and that negativity in that dark place. What keeps you motivated?
I think that competition, citing another personality test, I'm sure that a lot of your listeners are familiar with Gallup Strengths Finder. My number one strength in Strengths Finder is competition. Means I'm motivated by external things and comparing myself to others and comparing myself to my previous self. I get motivated because there's a next, but the challenge is sometimes it makes me impatient. And I started in leadership that way. Like leadership was just the next step on the ladder. I jumped in because it was next, not because I was ready. And my early leadership management experiences weren't always positive. I struggled. I made lots of mistakes. It took me a while to grow into a good leader. I think I've become a good leader, but it certainly caused some unnecessary pain for those people along the way because I was motivated because there was something next on the ladder. Part of the downside, I was so focused on what's next on the ladder and getting to it. I never asked myself if I wanted it. Of course, I wanted it. There's something next. I got to get there. I just wanted to see the achievements, just kept climbing. And those achievements usually it came in the form of job titles or span of control or money. Came from
Mhm.
no money, and there's an option to make even more. So may as well jump into it. So I was just impatiently look for whatever path would get me there. And then 5 years ago, right in the middle of the weight loss transformation, I had a kind of a second transformational experience that hit me at the same time. A few months in, I was laid off from a company where I'd worked for 10 years. That was a point where a lot of transformational things were all coming together at the same time. So at that point, it's like, well, why don't I take these months of severance I have and focus on having a sabbatical instead of jumping right into the next job. And I really wanted to figure out what came next in my life. So at that point, I took the sabbatical and I went through a lot of transformations. To finish the initial weight loss, I wrote my first book, which was the story of how I used project management to lose the weight. And my goal at this point was to figure out what's really important to me. Because if I'm going to keep investing and putting all my energy in something, I got to figure out what's going to be something I'm actually passionate about. Because near the end of my job, my passion wore pretty thin. A lot of us let our jobs define us and be part of our identity. And I do too. I'm not going to lie. But, figuring out a way to take a step back and say, how does the job play with other things that are important to you to come up with your overall mission? So essentially, I became a certified health and life coach. I expanded my side business from just being a blog and a book to then launching my own coaching practice. And it all led to me reinventing my what you do story. What I do story is no longer a job title. It's what I do. I help people achieve their goals. It also helped me redefine my view of leadership. And it doesn't have to be killing yourself 60 hours per week to add the word senior in front of your title or whatever you are. I'm a senior director, I'm a senior manager, senior vice president. That led me to publish my second book on leadership because I really learned some good leadership lessons along the way. So all this, like all those things of going through ups and downs and setting goals and always having a next, and it helps keep me motivated. But then I started learning the other thing that keeps me motivated is to share what I've learned. Is,
Yeah.
I'm anytime I take in a piece of knowledge, I want to figure out how I share it to help others.
One of the points I like that you hit on was, I think sometimes we go through life and we get to this point of like, who am I? Like, what am I doing? And a lot of times that is because we've identified ourselves with a position or with a job, and that's not you. And I love how you have turned that into like, well, what do I love to do? I love health. Let me get certified. I love helping people. You're a coach. I still love leadership. Let me write a book. And that is more of who you are versus that title or that senior or advancing in the corporate world. And I think a lot of times when you're identified by something, think about like sports, like football players, when their career's over, they're like, well, who am I? Because you defined yourself by playing football versus I love being active. I love being competitive. Now that feels different than I'm an NFL football player. So I think it's like, don't ever think you're one thing based on this title that you have. It is what you really enjoy doing in life.
Yeah, even if you kind of take an interest or a energy audit through the week of what are all the things I did this week that I liked, the things I didn't like, and if you expand, what are the things I've done through my career that I've liked and didn't like? Look at all those things you like and figure out how do these things all integrate? What's the broader message or broader concept here that these all ladder up to? And for me, it was goals and helping people achieve goals. When I started this whole journey, I didn't even really know that coaching existed. The only coaching I really knew existed were like personal trainers or were executive coaches. I've since then learned that leadership coaches span the gamut, and I've taken on a leadership coaching client as we've gone. I've taken on health coaching clients. It's interesting the things I've learned. So my definition of leadership has even changed.
Tell me how that has changed. Yeah. I mean, maybe it's going back to like thinking it was a title versus what you think it is now.
A little bit. When I was fresh out of college, I had a motivational poster or a little motivational picture. The text under it said, leadership is action, not position. Logically, I knew that, but it took me a long time to understand is really what that means and internalize it. There are jobs and positions that are branded as leadership. So in my last corporate job, anybody who was director or above was considered part of the leadership team. I think we've done a tremendous disservice by calling some positions leadership positions and others not. But those roles aren't what makes somebody a leader. I struggled when I first started running with, am I a runner? And I struggled when I first started writing, even after my first book, am I a writer? And somebody said that the rule of thumb is if you run, you're a runner. If you write, you're a writer. Well, leadership goes the same way. If you lead, you're a leader. So leading starts with having a mission or a goal or some point of view worth following. And so you don't just sit still and call yourself a leader. You're pursuing something. Once you have something that's worth pursuing, it involves mobilizing people to help bring the mission to life. And then while you've mobilized those people, caring about those people and helping them become the best versions of themselves. So kind of those three attributes. And then I think most importantly, it's being someone worth following. So clearly includes character. You can't be a jerk and not care about people and be a good leader. But it's more than that. For me, it's about being easy to follow, which means being approachable and being focused on lifting people up, not tearing them down. And for me, I've often found that the quickest way to open the door to approachability is make somebody laugh. Like I maybe some of the jokes are mistimed sometimes, but in general, I try to be fun in order to make myself easier to follow.
And you're easy. I mean, this is really our first time engaging one-on-one, and you're easy to talk to and super relatable. And I think it's a natural thing to like want to learn more and ask you questions. So I think that has really played a part in your leadership.
I hope so, because I think what goes hand in hand with approachability is humility. True leaders know they're not always right. I can tell you I'm not always right. I like to say that I generally try to be right 51% or more of the time. I like to be more predictable than flipping a coin. But true leaders are always open to learning and growing and being willing
Yep.
to say, I'm wrong, or more importantly, I don't know. Let's figure it out together. And then I think that all comes to being deliberate with the choices you make in your life. Don't
Yeah.
just trust your life to autopilot. You don't
Yeah.
have to do that. If you make deliberate choices and think about the consequences of your actions, have goals you're trying to achieve. Like, all those things help you be a leader worth following. And none of those characteristics I just described in any of that are anything you get promoted into. They may
Yeah.
help you get promoted, but
Right.
nobody tells you, okay, you can have a mission. No, go have a mission. Do what you
Yeah.
want to do.
So, Tony, looking back, you've done a lot with your life. You've come a very long way, in how you've evolved as a person. Looking back to that young Tony that you said was like weird, overweight, seeing where you're at today with your weight loss, your website, your books that you've written, what would you want to tell that younger Tony, seeing everything you've been through and how far you've come?
I think as I have reflected on my life, the first thing I would say to that younger Tony is, you are more than your achievements. Like, slow down, enjoy where you are for a minute, and figure out where you really want to go, really what your next step to be. Because just because there's another rung on the ladder doesn't mean that's the rung you want to be on. So slow
Mhm.
down. You're more than your achievements. Um,
Mhm.
and because it's so easy to become impatient because you see a next and a next and the next. Well,
Mhm.
if you're constantly chasing the horizon, then you're never going to reach it.
Mhm.
And there's a book called The Gap and the Gain that basically that the premise is never the gap is where you aren't, the gain is where you've come from. Use Look back and use the gain to evaluate your progress. Use the
Mhm.
gap to kind of set direction, but don't evaluate your success in life based on some idealized standard that you're not going to ever achieve. Look at where you come from, celebrate that, and then move on to the next thing. But don't don't let the fact
Yeah.
there's a gap between the ideal and where you are like make you unhappy.
What do you think young Tony would have needed to hear? Knowing that, the power, you're plugging in the electricity, your parents are fighting and, divorcing or on the edge of divorce. Like, what do you think he would have needed to hear at that time?
All the way back then, at that point, it would be, this is temporary.
Hmm.
This doesn't have to be who you are. You'll get out of this. Focus on something and pursue it. But basically, this is temporary. This doesn't have to be where you are.
Or focus on a
I
goal, like even that.
I eventually learned that. It took me 15 years of my young life to figure out that, oh, I have choices and I can focus on a goal and make those choices come to life.
Yeah.
But when you're taking that extension cord next door to plug in to get power, the idea of going to college is completely outside the realm of possibility. And
Yeah.
so I think the other thing to tell young Tony is, you can figure it out. Anything you want to do, you can figure it out. Don't immediately dismiss the goal because you don't think there's a path.
Yeah.
Don't let your goal die of loneliness.
Yes, exactly. I love that. Tell me how people can learn more about you. How could they work with you? You have a couple of books that are on Amazon.
Yeah. So early in the weight loss journey, I launched my website and blog. And originally the goal was to chronicle the experience to share with others because people had started telling me, oh, your journey's inspiring me. How are you doing? So both as an accountability tool and to help others, I launched a blog. Well, since then, and that website is operationmelt.com. Operation Melt started as a nickname when people were telling me I was just melting away. And
Mhm.
then I grew it in kind of my platform. Since then, the blog has taken on a different tone. It is now focused on goal success tools and techniques. Starting this year, I've started adding some interviews in and some other fun stuff. So you can find me at operationmelt.com. You can read the blog, join the email list. The email list is usually the easiest way to read the blog because while I share it on social media, well, we all know that social media is governed by algorithms. Those algorithms are governed by money, and I don't spend money on every one of my posts. So you join the email list, it gets delivered to your inbox every Sunday morning. Also at the website, you can learn about the books. I've got 2 paid books that you can get on Amazon. I also have 1 free downloadable ebook called the Goal Success Quick Start Guide, which goes from I don't know what I want to I have a smart goal, and it helps you with that process along the way. It is literally the same process I use when I coach people to help them figure out what they want to set as a goal to get started. And then you can also learn more about coaching while you're on the website. Everything kind of stems from goals coaching. No matter what the goal is, if it's health and fitness goals, if it's financial goals, if it's starting a business, if it's building your leadership, if it's something softer like I need to build confidence, all of that are goals that I can, help coach you on. And if I can't coach you on it, I will tell you up front, I don't want to take your money and then not give you anything. You can even schedule a discounted mini session, which is a 30-minute session just to kind of get your feet wet. And you can do that on the website. And then if you want to follow me on social media, I'm on Facebook and Instagram at Operation Melt.
Fabulous. Tony, this has been an amazing interview. Hearing your story, talking about goals, achieving them, everything you have been successful at in your life. I really do hope that people reach out to you or possibly even get your books, because I feel like you're living what you're coaching on. And I think that's super important with what you've experienced in life, not just weight loss, but just changing your life, making choices to achieve a better life. So thank you so much for your time today.
Happily, I'm happy to help anybody. Just because I charge for coaching doesn't mean I also don't enjoy having free conversations with people or exchanging emails. Just reach out.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Tony, for your time. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you.